we were like, we're going to start by releasing our first anthology. The first one was in 2014, end of 2014. It had a few poetry. We were just doing whatever we wanted. Like there was no rhyme or reason. We just wanted to compile anthologies. We just wanted to compile a collection of short stories from Kenya. And I don't know, the first one, there was a little fanfare. Like we got a bit of reviews, but not too much. Just Up Nairobi, which I used to work for, they reviewed our stuff. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. So we did the first one. The second one, we also tried to do something different. We had short stories and poetry again, but like they weren't primarily fantasy. So I don't know. We hadn't yet found our momentum. But by the third one, we decided to go back to our roots and start again with fantasy and go back to the fantasy roots. The first major review we got. So we got it from Wallet Alabi, for the guys who read fantasy. Wallet Alabi is like, in my opinion, get your shit together. And we did. So that's how, we did not get our stuff together immediately. What happened was that was the positive review. The negative reviews we got from the third one was that because we uploaded every single story that was submitted, there were no rejection letters. I think we started sending out rejection letters this time, because anything that we got, we would fix it. We would try to fix it and publish it. But then now we were getting a lot of backlash because third anthology, it's all men. There were no women writers because no one submitted. But then, so on Twitter, we were being lambasted, like, oh, this misogynistic publication. That time I'm crying. I'm like, nobody, like, and anyway, it's Twitter. There's no way you can go and be like, well, actually, this is what happened. Nobody's going to believe you and nobody's going to care. So I licked my wounds again, and I was like, you know what, the next anthology, I went and I got six women writers. I found individually, called them, like, please come and write for my anthology, please, please, please. They all agreed. And then I released the call out. We got, I have other things to do. So nobody wants to write for us. Stressing at the time. But still, again, we're going to lick our wounds and come back. And to little or no fanfare, literally no one really talked about. Now this time there are no reviews. Even the last time there were reviews, this one no reviews. No one's talking about us. So I'm like, why are we still doing this thing? But so at this point in time, my self-esteem is shattered. I am just like, nobody was right for me. Nobody cares about this work. Like, yes, I care about the work, but you know, if you don't see that reflected in like readership and stuff like that, it gets to a point where you're just wondering, why do I do this? So I took classes. I attended writing work better to be like, okay, maybe it's me, maybe I'm the issue, maybe it's, a lack of professionalism. Because also when you look at all the other publications like Lawware and bigger publications and Career Review, they all had these big names with, these writers who all have MFAs and published here and shortlisted in this. And, it's very, my name is Jeff and I'm a pilot. Like we were the Sisindo Makanga. Everyone else is like, big names. So it was just, okay, what do I need to do to become better? So I went for classes. I went for classes for writing. I went for screenwriting classes. I went for so many classes just trying to improve the output. But then at some point in time, I was like, okay, this is not working out. So I actually had left Will This Be a Problem? I was like, I'm going to go. I went to the farm. I became a farmer. I planted things. I started bargaining in the market, shouting at people. It was I just said a change of pace, because at some point in time I asked myself, like, if there was no internet, what skill sets do you have? What do you bring to the table? And I reached a point I could not answer that. I didn't know what I was contributing to the zeitgeist. And yeah, but then in taking that long break, and because that I went as soon as the pandemic, actually, like pandemic 2020 to, I came back to Nairobi officially like last year. But this whole time I'm on the farm, I am really learning the value of patience. In like, you know, when you plant a pumpkin seed and then the time it takes to grow, all the things you need to do, I kind of like just started seeing it very similarly to my writing. In this fact that like, yeah, will be a problem. We've been there for 10 years, yes. Well, soon approaching 10 years now at that point. But steadily, they've been getting better. I mean, I cannot compare the first one and where we are today. So, which brings us now to today. So I've come back and I'm like, no, we have to do this. But even as we're preparing for the anthology, there's a mental block in my head. So I'm like, what's wrong? You know, finally I have a chance to pay writers, because that was also a huge issue for me. Like the reason I left is because I'm like, we have this publication, I cannot pay writers. I can only pay one person, which is just like, I mean, I thought we were in this to, you know, help writers. So after all that time, I decided, you know what, I think it is best for me personally to focus on being an editor. And once I decided, like, you know, I'm no longer, like most times I introduce myself like, hi, I'm a writer and an editor. But switching it to being like, I am an editor and a writer, it made me feel a lot better about, like, you know, because my experience, I've written for parenting blogs, and I have no child. I've written for, like, I worked in what is practically, you know, I worked in surveillance. That was not tech, that was surveillance. I was an op. Like, I was an ops. And all these experiences, I'm like, that's what is, you know, I'm not, I don't have to diminish my work and the experience I have just because I don't have, or I'm not like, you know, I did not expect a lot of submissions. With the history that we've had, I was just like, maybe 15 people would, you know, be interested, because I've also gone around again asking guys like, hey, would you like to write for me, please. But then I went to, and I asked him like if he wanted to, Tomto, who is the co-editor of this anthology. And it was actually very strange because like the day before I messaged, I'd been looking at Somto's website, like I'm like, who is this person? I read literally all his stories the day before. So after that, Somto is amazing to work with. I think his like bio is my height. He's been published in everything, in every publication that you could think of. Clarksworth, and you know, again, I'm still feeling a little bit of intimidation, because I don't have those. I don't have those credentials. But he was so. I think he's like the most sensible editor I've ever worked with. You know, they're like, you can see, like, if you're going like exploring or something, like in the map or something, you can see the end. Like he can see the end. Like you are there looking, like, do we go this way? Do we go this way? He's seen the end without all the mark and stuff like that. So he was really a joy to work with. Very sensible editor, very kind to the writers, which is also, you know, something that I had also struggled with, because I was like, am I mean to my writers? Like, do they, like, are these comments too harsh? Like, wait, because sometimes you're just like, this sentence doesn't make sense. That's it. I don't have any other way to. But he would be like, is there a way you can do this? And the skill set that he had was just extremely admirable. And so we got 57 submissions. This is from 6 submissions. We were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So what happened was with the 50-something submissions, I mean, there were some stories that were just perfect when they came in. Like some of the writers, and it's so strange because like with some of the writers, like one of the writers called Albert Nkerim, he's from Nigeria. When he said that like this story, he had been working on it for ages. It had been rejected from every publication. But as soon as it came into our publication, we were like, no, this one we're publishing for sure. So, you know, life is just kind of funny like that for writers, where like you've been rejected so many times and then you come and you bring your things to this your problem. We'll help you. So, yeah. Where was I? Yeah, so with Somto, we worked with Somto, 55 submissions. It reached a point in time where I was like, the money I had to pay the writers was not going to be enough. I had money to pay 12 people, but we have 21 stories that are amazing. We cannot let all of them go. Because, I don't know, I felt very possessive of these stories. So like, you've sent them to me, you trust me with your work. So I have to honor your work as a, you know, as a writer. Some editors say that they see other people's stories as their children. I'm like, nah, these are not my kids. They are your kids, but I'm just like, I am the custodian for a while, and I'll help you take care of them. Yes. Yeah, sorry, I am going off track. So, yeah. I think that's it. So yeah, issue 5, I think like every issue, we're always like super proud of it. But this one, like, I don't know. Every single story, I know every single story word for word. Like I've been with these stories for so long because like we did the call out in February, but we've been with them all this time because I think I really enjoy the process of keeping a story. You know, now with AI and all this stuff happening, is that like people are just trying to get themselves published, but you kind of lose the reason as to why do you want people to see your work? Why do you want, is it for fame, or is it because, you know, there's this something that you really have to there's something you have to tell people, you have to share this plot, you've thought of something and you can conceptualize it from start to finish, and you just need other people to participate in this, you know, to come see. So with the difference in like you know, just been submitted in February, we publish it in March. Like I don't feel like that's as an adequate enough time to really give the story a chance to do what it's supposed to do. And so we spent a lot of time on it on purpose. Like this thing was supposed to have been released in September, but we just kept pushing it forward because they're like, no, the story has to get better. It needs more work. I need to read something else to, you know, maybe it's me who's maybe I need to read something else. Maybe, you know, we need to watch something else and see that I need to consume more media in order to make this one a streamlined and coherent piece. So yeah, so for the, you know, this is the 10th year and the 5th issue, and I am extremely proud of where we started off from. Like you can, like, even if you download the first one, which I wouldn't say, but like if you download the first one and you compare the 5th one, like you can see that the work it's not just the writers who have, you know, because some of the writers, we've been with them since the beginning, Peter, Nena, Kevin, Dakalira, they've been with us for a really long time. So these, even in their work, you can see that the growth it's there. Like, and I think the most, like, it's been, we also released a magazine, which was because there were too many stories and we couldn't publish all of them. But we also didn't want to sell the anthology and then not have, because we have always given free stories on our website. So why, you know, it seemed extremely, I think it would be like exploiting your audience. You know, you build this audience and then you're like, okay, fine, by then now that you're here, here's, give me 2,000 for the book. Like, no. So we were like, yes, we'll sell the book, but we will also have a free magazine where we're still going to do the same things. We're still going to have free stories on the website. Not that they're any less, that the quality is any less. They are all of the same caliber, but just the reason that we had the magazine is that like some stories come in perfectly and some don't, and you know, it's not fair to just throw the baby out the bathwater just because there's so many other good stories. That doesn't mean your story is bad. Just this means that like, you know, it might need some work. So the magazine is specifically for the stories that like have come in, and we can see that the bones are strong, but they just need a little more work. The process takes much longer than it does with the anthology, but you know, it's like we are working with you to make your story better. And the greatest thing that's happened so far with the magazine is that it's new, it's just come out, but we've had like reviews. Again, Waleta Labi reviewed the magazine, a story from the magazine. That story, when it came in, it did not look the way it does at the end. And the thing is that like the things that Waleta Labi was praising, like he was like, oh, he loved the sibling dynamic and, you know, the way the story flows. The sibling dynamic, I'm telling you, they were killing each other in the story. But then now we fixed it. And, you know, that's now the affirmation that I needed. That like, you know, we fixed your story. Now they are not killing each other. Now everybody loves the siblings. So yeah. Okay, I've rambled for a bit, but yeah, thank you so much for coming. And now we are going to do the readings. All right. Dennis, come. Okay, so this, we're going to go into the reading portion. So we're just going to read a couple of excerpts from the story. This is Dennis Muga. He's my friend, and we were in the writer's workshop together, and he's also a published author. He just released Half Portraits Underwater, which you should also buy. It's very good. Yeah, so I asked him to do me a favor and write and come and read a story from the anthology. So this story is, it's called The Market of Memories, and it's by Azara Swanya. She's from Nigeria, and she's the youngest, I think, she's the youngest writer. This is her first publication. Her first publication. So.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Muga, as you've heard, and I would like to begin reading the story, The Market of Memories by Azara Swanya. They ask you what Aliyah Danjuma reminds you of, and the word that bursts forth from your lips is the wrong one, because you tell them she reminds you of glass. Glass! The man closest to you sputters out, a shaped eyebrow raised in condescension. She reminds you of glass? Yes, you want to say, but not boring glass, not the kind used to fill windows or the ones kept by the rich for drinking water and flaunting wealth, but stained glass, the ones they hung up in large churches to signify that onlookers ought to gawk in reverence, the type of glass that refracts light in a thousand pretty colors, simply beautiful by morning, but at night, when everything is cascaded in darkness, lighting the way in iridescence. Glass, You shakily repeat instead. Then bite down on your tongue to halt the rest of your refrain, to stop yourself from telling the extractors that Aliyah Danjuma reminds you of glass, not because she is or was clear to read, but because she had a way of legating light so that in her presence everyone was worthy of praise. The man blinks at you, his large eyes magnified by the glasses slowly slipping down his nose. He casts a sideways glance towards his colleague to your left, a dark woman with pink braids tied up in a ponytail, destined to recede her hairline. The woman subtly shakes her head at the man, incessantly clicking the pen in her manicured hand. You want to ask her, no, yell at her to stop, to fidget less and question more. The questioning is the final part of the extraction, and the woman had the woman been any good at her job, you would have been on your way home by now. Finally, she clears her throat with a flair that suggests she didn't need to in the first place, and rests her hand gently on your shoulder. It smells like vanilla. Zainab, she says calmly, but the sound of your name in her crisp, cut voice nearly drives you mad. I know I do not have to explain to you why this final part is important. Seeing as you have undergone an extraction 6 times over, you know she has not spoken unkindly, yet you have never had to ingest such bitter words. 6 times is not nearly as terrible as what the people surrounding you have undergone. It's nowhere near as awful as the 16 extractions your neighbor, Miss Aliko, had suffered through, causing the elderly woman in the yellow house opposite yours to forget the nasty coloring of her own home. Not as bad as your mama's 20 extractions had been, each mind-altering one done to raise money for you. Your mother, who now sometimes smiles at you with a saccharine facade of someone pretending to be familiar with you, long lost herself to the process. And 6 is certainly not as terrible as your husband, Kamal's, who, after his 41st and final extraction, was found near a gutter in Ikeja, though you live around Maryland. When he was finally brought home by the men who had ruined him, he claimed he did not know who you were or what he was doing there. But 6 is still terrifying, and each time you've done it, with every invasive question, and even worse, prodding into your mind to dig out the memory of choice. You remember your husband's now glazed over eyes, his inability to care for you, though he is vaguely aware he's supposed to. And you stare at the extractor with a pointed device, wondering at which turn of their hand you are supposed to end up like him. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Peter Nena. Is he here? Is he leave? Hello? Oh, hey. So this is Peter Nena. Oops. This is Peter Nena, who clap for him. So Peter he's been writing Poems Per Problem, I think, since the first one. Yeah, I think he's only missed one. Yeah, so and today is the first day I've met him. It's the first time I've ever laid eyes on him. I had no idea what he looked like, but I have read, I think, so many stories of his. He's a very talented writer. Yeah, so just come. You read. Sorry? Oh, okay, all right. Okay, fine. Do you want to still talk about yourself?
Yeah, I can talk about something. Hello. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. My name is Peter Nena. I'm a Kenyan, so I have all the experience Kenyans have. I write horror stories. When I was very little, I had a brother, and he used to tell me a lot of crazy stories. And some of those stories stuck. Like especially one that I liked most, when I think about it, I think I like it every day I think about it. he told me about a drunkard who got lost at night. And then because it was bad, he wanted to tell me that it was bad to be drunk. So the drunkard got lost. He fell asleep by the roadside. Then a python found him. So the python didn't want to eat him because the python was full, but wanted to teach him a lesson that don't drink again. So the python swallowed only one leg. One of his leg. So that story, I like it every day because of the way when I think about a python swallowing only just one leg of yours, and I think that is so crazy. And then when we were going through school, we read a lot of thrillers, spear books, all those a lot of thrilling books. You pick it up and you can't put it down. Sidney Sheldon kind of books. And then I met Meja Mwangi. So Meja Mwangi, I read the first book I read for Meja Mwangi was called The Cockroach Dance. Now that story is very different from all the books I'd read because the main character is like the villain. It's the villain in his own story, but it's not a villain that goes after people, but he thinks everybody's wrong. So there's his neighbor is called the Magendo, and then another guy is called the bathroom man. So another guy there's called Skumawiki, and then the other guys who are called the faceless ones. So when you read that book, you discover it's kind of a horror story. If you ask me, I think it's a psychological horror story because the bathroom man lived in a bathroom, and next to that bathroom there's a toilet, and every time Skumawiki went there, he would go and do his thing in the morning, and Dusman, the main character, would hear him doing that crack thing there. And so it goes on. So you don't know who the bad guy is in the story, but the story goes and it keeps you there all through. And then later on, when I started writing my own stories, I thought, you're alive. Sometimes you have small wins, sometimes you don't, and then you die. So mostly you die. so I thought, why not? You can keep the theme going. But that's actually what we are living through. So the story is about to read. It's called Why Donkeys Have 44 Teeth. One day I was there on Gong Road. I live along Gong Road, and I'm seeing this donkey, and he's showing all his teeth, and I'm wondering, why does this thing have all the teeth it needs? It eats grass, for Christ's sake. But it has like a lot of teeth. When you check on, when I went to find out, I found it's like a lot of teeth, 44 of them. And then, there's something that's been happening in Kenya lately. The children disappearing a lot. Like between 2023 and 2024, there were like 7,000 children disappeared, 50 and 58. That's like over 7,000 children. That's like 18 children per day. So in the story, the original version was where you get the monster. Like my friend says, monsters are people. All monsters are people. So you want to find that, and then, but now in the story, it's not the same as that. But the story now it's like what we do is speculative fiction. But in the original version of it, it's people doing that. So I think I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
All right. Why Donkeys Have 44 Teeth by Peter Nena. On an ordinary Thursday night in Gong Avenue Estate, along Gong Road in Nairobi, 9-year-old Jack Dulu had the most extraordinary dream ever. He dreamed that a donkey was talking to him. The donkey was at his bedroom window, tapping on the pane and calling his name. Jackie, it was repeating with every tap. Come out to play, come out to play. This was extraordinary because the number of times Jack had ever seen a donkey in his life could be counted on the fingers of his left hand. Like most ordinary folk, he didn't think about donkeys. They never crossed his mind when he wasn't seeing them. He had seen them along the road, pulling carts loaded with yellow water jerry cans, but that was all he knew about them. In this dream, however, he was trying to scream, but he could not make a sound. And he could not run. As if tired of tapping on the plane, the donkey opened the window and pushed its head through into the room. It was a black donkey, and it was grinning at Jack. Jackie, come out to play, it said again, and reached down to grab Jack with hands that looked like human hands. Jack woke up when the donkey touched him. Sweat was pouring from his face and armpits, and his bed sheets was damp. He sat up and glanced quickly at his bedroom window. He saw that it was still closed and the curtains were drawn over it. He glanced across the room to see if Susie was there. As if aware that he was watching her, she turned and drew a blanket over her head. Her reassuring presence calmed him down, and he returned to sleep. I dreamt that there was a donkey at the bedroom window, he announced at breakfast. He had cleaned himself and dressed up for school. Susie, who was the first one to wake up in the family, had toasted tomato sandwiches and prepared tea for breakfast. That's so stupid, Lynn said moodily. She was 14, and stupid was her favorite word. Susie had said that it was because Lynn was an adolescent. Jack didn't know what that meant, but thought it had to do with his sister being too skinny. His best friend, Roy, said Lynn was as skinny as a shadow. There was a skinny girl in his class called June, who was also rude. It's not stupid, he protested, and then took a chunky bite of his sandwich. He chewed it and washed it down with tea. He liked hot tomato sandwiches. The donkey wanted me to come out and play with it, he explained. Well, how smart is that? Lynn exclaimed and burst out with sarcastic laughter. Susie laughed too. Even Jack's father joined in. Jack sulked. He stopped eating. I'm not telling you the rest of my dream, he told Lynn. Show me where it hurts if you don't tell me, Lynn continued laughing. He brooded for some time and almost called her Linda, but she would beat him up for that later on. Only their father was allowed to call her by her real name. Eat, Baba, finish your breakfast. Susie pampered him, and he resumed eating. He didn't get to tell them how he had been terrified of the donkey, and how the donkey had tried to grab him with hands that appeared human. Maybe it was a good thing that he didn't tell them. They would have laughed their heads off if he had. On his way to school, just as the bus trundled past Dagoretti Corner, he saw a gray donkey carrying a load of charcoal. It was walking slowly, the load heavy. It was shaking its tail, constantly warding off flies. And for the first time in his life, Jack noticed that its tail was shorter than that of a cow. He also noticed that its hooves were not split and that its jaws were protruding powerfully as though it chewed bones. He thought the donkey in his dream had a bigger head than this one. He wondered why he was seeing this donkey today of all days. Considering his dream, maybe just a coincidence, he thought. Or maybe he was just now starting to notice them. Why would he dream about a donkey anyway? Have you ever seen a black donkey? He asked Roy, who was seated next to him. I hate donkeys, Roy said promptly, as if he had been expecting the question. Why? Jack asked. Because they're animals. I hate animals. Why? Jack asked again. When you're stupid, people call you an animal. Jack didn't say anything about that. Nobody had ever called him an animal. He guessed he wasn't stupid. Roy was older than him by 1 year. As a final point, I've read this story. The twist at the end, please buy a copy. You must read it. It's fantastic.
Next reading is from Shingai's story. I don't even know how to describe Shingai. Yeah, just good. Her writing is very good. That's the only way I can describe it fairly. So she's not in the country. She couldn't be here with us today. But Shiro Mutero is going to read for us. Shiro is one of our beta readers on Will This Be a Problem? So she's seen these stories and she has fought for their rights more than everyone else. So yeah.
Skins. I see a newspaper headline on my way to tell my boss I'm quitting my job. It is over a decade since I first heard Nyanya's story. Teacher finds pupil cheating, beats him to death. It should be a semicolon. That's my first thought. If I were editing this, I would have placed a semicolon after cheating instead of a comma. I sigh and put the newspaper I picked off of the matatu seat next to me back down. This is why I'm quitting, why I have to quit. He says no, of course, my boss. He says I'm too good to let go. You know, Kenyans these days don't read, let alone write. How am I supposed to find someone who knows how to edit a fucking story? Eh? Have you seen graduate Sikwizi? The graduate Sikwizi. They can barely spell their own names. I tell him he is a fairly competent man with good judgment and that he'll be all right. There are enough jobless Nairobians looking for any kind of work, more than willing to endure his micromanaging abuse for the security of a job. I do not say this last part out loud. I'll give you a raise, his last Hail Mary. I look at the old typewriter on his desk, a tribute to the old ways or days of writing. He's the type of man who believes that the British canon is the only measure of good writing, the type of man who treasures the old methods of getting the words on the page. In the age of laptops and computers, he clings to the idea that nothing true can be written unless a typewriter is involved in the process. But every once in a while, if it's written longhand, it may pass. I shake my head. Why? Will you at least tell me why you're leaving? Is it another job? I swear if Nation poached you, I will break someone's bones. Ever so briefly, I see a flicker of something sharp in his mouth. I rub my eyes, squeeze them shut, and then open my laptop. I show him. Every story I've been editing, every brutal headline where I've inserted a comma, deleted a colon, switched out a question mark for a period when it should have remained a question. But it's not our job to question. It is our job to inform and write objectively what is without asking why it is the way it is. What is it? The question is all over his face. The stories you've been editing. I can't do it anymore. It's too much pain, violence, brokenness. He shakes his head. He tells me no, it cannot be too much. He says that this is a calling of journalism, the heart of the matter. We must sift through the hard shit and share it to the world, because if we don't, who will? I shrug and say, somebody else. He calls me a coward. I tell him goodbye. I dreamt that night. I dreamt of a little boy. His mouth is open, and something is trying to get out. Or in. I walk towards him. There are wounds on his body. They won't stop bleeding. Let me help, I cry, but he cannot answer. The thing in his mouth is choking him. When I reach for it, it cuts, drawing blood from the largest vein in my wrist. I scream, knowing it's a type of wound that will never heal. My blood drains. My skin turns pale.
Alex? I'm not. This is your first story.
Yeah.
Okay, you tell them. Yeah.
Hi, guys. As she just told you, this is not my very first story. My very first short story ever written in my entire years of life. So you can imagine how nervous I am. She'll tell you how many times it was like, oh, just send. So I guess, can I just give a little bit of how this story came to being? So I've been writing essays for a long, long time. A friend of mine owned a blog called Manenos, and then he just brought us writers together. And I was like, okay, now you do things, just send. And then I did that for like a while. And then I collected, I was just looking at my draft folder, I have like 30. I'm like, okay, now we need to upgrade. But then I got into uni. And then I met another mentor of mine. He's like, this is really good stuff. Now you need to turn it academic. I'm like, okay, when in Rome. So I write a bunch of papers, and then the best part about, like, I lucked out with the university I went to, so I get a couple of book chapters, but it's all purely academic, and academic writing doesn't slap the same. You feel like it's like you're regurgitating. It's like my first journal article is like, okay, nice. So drink a soda and some Pringles, you're happy. A book chapter, yeah, with my professor, my dean, nice. And then I get introduced to another friend of mine. It's like, okay, now have you tried short story writing? And I'm like, okay, let me try and cook something up. And then I do, and it's horrible. But I have been born with a certain sense of hubris. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to look for the one place I can send it. You know, I sent it to Clark's World. Those who know. Because at this, before I started writing, it's like you have to read, digest and then understand what it is, right? So I sent it to easily one of the biggest magazines on the planet for SFF writers. It gets rejected in days, of course. It doesn't even pass preliminary review. But I'm like, no, I like this one. Because some themes I'm hoping you'll be able to tell from the excerpt I read. It was just inspired by my love for my sister. My sister moved to Australia in 2019. I haven't seen her physically since. But she did a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's the funny part, right? Like, she moved away and then I realized how much she loves me because she paid a chunk of my fees. She bought me my laptop, and for a writer, your laptop is your livelihood. And then I'm just like, damn, that's where that came from. And then the story just came together. And then I sent it to Clarksworld. It got rejected, and then I'm chilling, and then my friend is like, there's this lady, her name is Makena Angelica, she's doing an anthology. I'm like, okay, Kenyan, okay. She might relate to small. I send. And she said, okay, this is nice, but she ends up canceling the anthology. And then I'm just chilling. That week, on Twitter, I don't remember who I was stalking, probably some writer. I see will this be a problem call coming. I'm like, I'm not blinking. Send, email, fast. I used my school email even. I didn't even use my professional one. That's how much I didn't want to think about it. And then it gets accepted. I don't believe it. So every time there's a bit of delay, I was just Olivia. The emails, I'm sorry about that. I just couldn't believe it. And then here we are. So I'm really happy and I'm really grateful. And when you told your story about those 10 years, if you've ever worried, if you're doing anything for anyone out there, then without you and your anthology, I'd be stuck editing and writing journal articles for law review. It's boring. Yeah. So I don't have the. Thanks. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So my story is called The Song of Ruin. The scorching sun beats down mercilessly, casting a harsh glow over the ruins of old Nairobi. Simiren leapt over chunks of debris, never missing a step, even as his eyes scanned the desolate landscape. He ran his hands through his ochre-caked locks, the undying symbol of the Ole Nairobi since before, at least according to the elders, the era before the sun fell. Every step of a concrete and rusted rebar took a toll on Simiren's frail frame. Every breath made his already burning lungs scream, but he couldn't stop. He didn't dare to stop. Fear and desperation propelled him forward. With each step, he became increasingly aware of the eerie silence that enveloped the shattered city. The gigantic skeletons of broken buildings seemed to suck in all the light around them. What had once been doors and windows became jaws of death, ready to devour him should he make a wrong step. Simiran pulled his sweat-drenched shuka tighter as a small storm of dust swirled around him. He crouched near a broken wall, waiting for it to pass. Around him, nature had begun to reclaim the land, as weeds pushed through cracked remains of pavement, reclaiming the city for themselves. Unbeknownst to him, the ruin that served as his temporary shelter from the storm once held extraordinary significance. This was where the highest decision-makers of his now ruined city and many others surrounding it had once debated on issues affecting millions. This was the ruin of the Kenyan parliament. Here, the lords of the land had sat. The elders in the tribe still told stories of how, despite the old era bursting with abundance, the leaders of the time had been corrupted to their very essence. They plundered endlessly from those who could feed themselves, who could barely feed themselves, to build gigantic dwellings of stone and metal, not to live in, but to show off to other plunderers. What about their clansmen, their people? Surely they complained, Simiran had asked the elder. Why, of course they did, he answered with a smile. They did more than complain. They rose and they marched to the very chambers of power of the old world. In response, my boy, his face straightened. His voice grew somber. They cut down their own people, their own blood, with weapons of fire and iron. The real reason why the war started was lost to history. The results of the war, however, marked the earth forever. Millennia of human civilization was erased in mere moments. The earth was torn apart, and its surface turned into a gruesome tapestry of open wounds. In the wake of it all, humanity fell like flies. It was Armageddon. Millions were killed during the war, with billions more lost to starvation and the ensuing struggle for survival. Mother Earth had sung the requiem for her wayward, deaf children. The lucky ones died shortly after the war. Those cast to survive were forced to brave a world hostile to their very existence as they struggled to eke out a living from the burnt earth. Still, Mother Earth loved her children. She sang to them, and those who listened not only survived, but gained great power. Those who could listen best became attuned to the rhythms of their new reality. Some could hear the wing beat of a fly on carrion several stone throws away. Some could hear the invigorating song of their beating heart. Some the music of the rivers of blood in their veins, and a precious few even the darkness whispers of the mind. In learning to listen to the melodies of nature, these individuals resonate with the rhythms of reality itself. Through that, they could strengthen their bodies beyond what was previously thought possible, control their sleep and focus, and for some, even their perception of time. For the very best of them, they could alter their resonance so utterly that they could shift into entirely different beings. The dust storm passed, and Simiran resumed his trek across the wrecked city.
Right. So I'm going to read a story again from someone who's not here. It's called Acceptance. This is by Kaya Maseko. He's a South African writer. This is, I think, also his first publication. If I'm not sure. He said that everything was like he's been self-published all along. So this is his first other publication, I guess. Yeah. So it's called Acceptance. A place where heroes go to rot their flesh to white bone. We blacks have it, down to the whitest bone. They said, and we heard their words. Here we are, alive and clicking from having met the orators of our time. How alive are we, I ask you? I have asked. The pulse that beats in your ears, I want to know who owns us. Maybe it's time. Time owns us. Time is space. Matter is energy. This is existence. But how many existences are there? Sitting a man is on a decision. Ample and wide enough is it to support his lanky form, spread-legged on the lawn of predecisions. He looks carefree, but he is not. The decision beneath him is on his mind. Deaths of friends and comrades too. To an outsider, he would seem to be at rest, but he is not. It's time to move from this point, he decides. He decides to accept the bomb. He knows the manufacturer as well. They are talented, meticulous folk, and he feels relatively safe, considering the gravity of the situation before them. The land beyond the lawn of predecisions is vast, so many routes to take. He must choose a path where he survives the going-ons. They go. On and on do the repercussions of our decisive acts go. The coffee cup is emptying. The kettle is cold. People are hawking outside the window noisily. They're selling at higher and higher prices lately. They won't even resist the oppressive taxes that hang over their heads like a coin-operated guillotine. They've been beaten down to the level that capitalist for democratic governance wants them. Compliant, dependent, hungry, and apathetic. As the duality of the multiverse goes, extreme apathy always beckons the reflex of extreme activism. He is on the deep end of activism, and it isn't a pool, it is an ocean. He prepares to swim a gulf between the normative and transformative, between this trying world and the next few, asking always if and how his influence will change things. Alu is no suicide bomber. He is a survivor, one of those people who like to sit and watch over what he has wrought. No doubt about it. This is an act of overt by-the-book terrorism. The days of poetic terrorism are over. Appealing to the humanity, the aesthetic, and the reasoning faculties of the people in charge no longer works. Has it ever? Protests, marches, and petitions engulfed the government offices. But after decades and decades of marches and petitions, the government started burning them, protesters and petitions alike. The big riot trucks with the hoses had been replaced with flamethrowers, and revolutionaries banned. The jackboot on the human face now wore spiked cleats. The fire of fight in people was thought to be all but extinguished, but an ember was kept safe. One burning hot coal survived in the hearts of the vigilant. Inaba, dial, Alu says out loud. His wristcom picks up the command and dials a few seconds of a binaural beat ringtone and then a reply. Hello, Bespoke Watches, how may we help you get in sync? Salute. Inaba, this is Alu. I accept. Let's meet up, all right? You sound as sure as squats, my man. Sure. Where do we meet? He nearly says, at the Valley of Decision, but catches the words before they escape his mouth. Meet me where they killed Yoli and Star. Sure. And at the same time, yes, you know it. Alu terminates the connection and sits back for a while, looking up at his zebra-striped ceiling. He switches his wristcom to projector mode and aims for the wall. The most popular game show is on, Head in a Bag. In this show, criminals and pretty much to make an example of are put through trials. Different tests are thrown at them, from the physical to the mental. Right now, they were doing the Schrodinger's cat game, which involved putting one of the contestants in a sound and light-proof box. The audience was then asked to vote if he was alive or dead. The other contestants would then have to guess and then wait for the big reveal. If he was alive or dead, the contestants who guessed wrong would be executed on the spot. The irony was one couldn't vote that he was both alive and dead. The game was rigged. Someone won, someone lost. It was a zero-sum. So Kaya, the reason I wanted to read this story specifically was because the reason I wanted to read this story is because I think when you're a writer, there are times where you have to put your trust in the editor. You have to be like, you know what, this person knows more than I do, definitely. And so I have to just give up and let go and let God. But sometimes you know more than the editor. You know the story that you want to tell. You know what you want to do. This person, they know what you want to do. They just have a rough idea. So with Kaya, it was very, he pushed back a lot on a lot of the edits. And some of them he just ignored. He was like, I'm not going to look at that. And I'm like, what's going on? Why are we not having a conversation? He's like, because the story is, the story is a very dark story. It's set in, I don't even know how, like post-apocalyptic South Africa, where there's a lot of killing a lot of gay people, and it's just oppression, the capital of oppression. And the world that this story is set in is so messed up. It's so, things have gone wrong. Like this guy's clearly you can hear from the things they're watching on TV. Society has fallen apart. But there's some times where you're like, as an editor, you kind of want to fix a story where you're like, what will the readers think? What if is this offensive? Do we need a sensitivity reader for this? Is it going to be offensive to queer people and things like that? But I was like, in this world, it's a horrible place. There is no space for political correctness in the things we are talking about. Not that there's no space for political correctness in the world, but just in this story, in this world, there is no space for that. And so, yeah. And I was a bit annoyed by, refusing to take the edits. Because I'm like, it's my publication. If you don't listen to me, I'm going to remove this thing. But either way, he just, the way he was so steadfast in his conviction that he was right and that this is how his story was going to be told is actually something that I'd like more writers to just absorb that approach. Not every editor is going to know what they're doing, and not every editor is going to be your op. You have to learn that discernment. Yeah. Okay, our last story is from Tony. Yes, come. Just talk about yourself. You're not going to read. Are you shy? Oh, okay. It's okay. You can just talk about yourself. I'll read it for you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. The story that is part of this anthology is called The Clans. I wrote it around, I think that was 2023 in December. I was home I was in Sharks for the holidays, and so my village is at the feet of this hill, and at the top of the hill there used to be there's a church, a Catholic church, but then when I got home I found that the church had fallen down somehow, had come crumbling down. So I was like, what if the ancestors brought the church down? Yeah, and then I was like, again, what if I wrote a story about it? And that's how the story came to be. Yeah, it was just something fun I was trying out. I'm usually not a fiction writer. I write more of a non-fiction writer. This was like my first published fiction. But yeah, here we are. Olivia, thanks for editing. And thank you.
Okay, so I'll read a short excerpt from the clans. Okay. A priest was dead. A dead priest was nothing unusual here. The clans cared about dead priests as much as they did the expansive sky or the huge rocks atop the hill where snakes burst after ecstasis. They were just things that were always there but had nothing to do with them. A priest would die and another priest would be sent to replace him. That's how it had been for the past 500 years. Long after the white man had built his church and proclaimed himself the lord of the land. Long after the white man's clans had declared wars against each other, mopping the world in blood. Long after the white man had granted the clans and other African clans the right to be people, albeit to lesser degrees of peopleness. Long after the African governments had risen and with the help of the white man, crumbled in the debris of their co-making. The church and its priests had been there for a long time, and the clans much, much longer. On Sundays, the majestic cathedral atop the hill would teem with heaven-bound life. All the clans wearing pristine smiles and immaculate suits would gather here in rare moments of unity to pay reverence to a God they never cared to understand. The gong would sound at exactly 9 a.m. to signify the start of Mass, and the choir, dressed in robes whiter than the priest's skin, would begin doing what the priest says everyone will do all day long in heaven. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Ave Dominus, take off. The choir led the singing in Latin. Ave Maria min Jesus Christus Rodua. The clans chorused in Luonized Latin. This would go on for an hour, sometimes more. Veni Creator Spiritus. The monks invoked the spirit of the Creator. Mentes tuoram visita, imple, okay, it's a lot of Latin. Imple superna gratia. The symphonic voices engulfed the aging cathedral like the stench of rotting flesh. It was all ridiculous. This was one of the few things the clans could agree upon. Going to heaven to forever sing about a virgin woman who gave birth over 2,000 years ago. Who would want to go to such a place anyway? What clan of nitwits would want that? The clans exchanged accusatory glances. Not us. Not us either. Certainly, most definitely, not us. It was settled then. Like their forefathers before them, none of the clans ever bought into these ridiculous performances. But this white priest and his people believed the tasteless wine he served the clans was the blood of the Son of God, and the dry bed was his body. The clowns found it hilarious, watching him clown around, saying one bad thing about the creatures of the night, another about the messengers of Juogi, the ancient spirits. They laughed inwardly at his gaucherie, plain stupidity, and chorused amen whenever he mentioned heaven. The truth is, there were vicious things lurking in the shadows of this village, crawling beneath its forests and reveling in the cover of its darkness. Things that would literally and figuratively explode Father Macarius's head if he ever knew of their existence. Things so powerful and feral that even his God wouldn't be able to serve him. Even his God wouldn't be able to save him from their claws. The clans were only too happy to protect the oblivious priests from their secrets. So every Sunday, they wore sharp suits and shiny kitenge dresses, ascended the hill for the church, yelled amen to Macarius' God, and rebuked this guy called Satan, who was jealous of Macarius and his people. But when the evenings came and the sun had gone to the realm beyond, they offered sacrifices to Were, the god of the eye of the rising sun, on the same hill, and thanked the spirits for the continued prosperity of the clans. For it was neither the building nor the god that resided within its walls that was poignant to the clans. It was the hill, what it was before the white man built his church, what it is now, what it will always be for the next generations until the end of time, the source of the clan's power. For so long as the hill held its place, the clans would always be there. Right. So that's the reading portion done. And so we're going to go into the discussion part of it.
Okay. Do you want to do your introduction or your forward? Yeah. Hello, hello. All right. Before we get into this next part of the segment, I think as a university student who sat through many lectures and just had to look at people talking for ages, it gets quite draining. So I'm going to ask everyone to just stand up for 1 second, and we're going to clap on my clap. We're going to do 3 claps, stretch our limbs out, and then we'll go on with the segment. So everyone on their feet, 1 second, quick. So we are clapping to celebrate literature in Africa and how good these guys are doing. All right, so 3 claps on my clap. You follow my clap, don't just clap yourself. Explaining, how she built this idea and concept and how it's gotten to where it is. And can I use yours? Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, and she has said that she is an writer, and she used to be a writer-editor. And we have read everyone else's excerpts. So I'd like to read a brief foreword for this edition of the anthology, which was written by Olivia. And it explains and puts into far better words than I think even she can explain herself, her passion for this writing. So this is just her thoughts on this anthology and the stories that are there. If reality had a shape, it would be water, fluid, elusive, capable of slipping through a child's curious fingers, yet powerful enough to carve out entire landscapes. If you had to define this anthology in a single word, it is about reality, not as a fixed or immutable truth, but as something malleable, a construct shaped by memory, perception, and the stories we choose to believe. Within these pages, reality stretches beyond its perceived boundaries, splinters under pressure, and reforms itself into new haunting shapes. These stories emerge from a continent where history's scars still burn and alternate futures feel tantalizingly close. They were written against the backdrop of crises, genocides unfolding just beyond the artificial borders, social media feeds tattooed by increasingly horrific images, ruined cities, ruined lives, ruined peoples, and their cries for help lost in the cacophony of capitalism's interpretations. Ad after ad for tech, games, and movies that don't look or do anything different from their previous iterations, followed by videos of immense suffering from Congo, Sudan, and Palestine. Who can honestly process all this suffering? How many more shiny things will be shoved down our throats until we can no longer dissociate from this grotesquerie? Even those who shield themselves with the belief that those things happen over there would never happen here, need to open their eyes. Everything is happening, everywhere, all at once, to everyone. Colonial powers, new and old, unsatisfied with their plunder and ruin of Africa, remain embedded in the continent, hiding behind the masks of global partnerships, aid, and economic development. All those words were in quotation marks. While the reality underneath remains one of extraction, exploitation, and control, the stories we are told and those we tell ourselves shape these realities, rendering systemic violence invisible, or worse, acceptable. Multiple iterations of denialism, climate change, COVID, genocide, and the resurgence of right-wing extremisms and neo-Nazi ideologies all build their foundations on fractured narratives. These conspiracy theories metastasize into alternate realities that twist the past distort the present, and radicalize the future, breeding violence that disproportionately targets the marginalized. Ultimately, the most vulnerable bear the brunt of our delusions, their suffering erased or rendered invisible in a reality disfigured by silence and complicity. This anthology gathers stories that refuse those silences and confront the fractured truth head on. They ask, who gets to define what is real? What happens when the narrative shatters? When do we rewrite the stories and reshape the realities forced upon us? Through speculative, fantastical, and surreal lenses, the writers in this anthology explore the boundaries of reality, how it bends, how it breaks, and what it can become. They dream fiercely, even amidst catastrophe, offering a vision of reality that is not static, but alive, dangerous, and filled with possibility. So that's just a peek into the mind of Olivia. And this is an open discussion, so as much as me and her will be taking the lead, if anyone feels like they have a point or something that is really pressing them that they must say, just shoot your hand up and we'll throw you a mic. So yeah, let's have a chat. So, Olivia, how are you? How's your day? Yeah.
I've slept like 3 hours. I mean, sleeping. I've just been waiting for this day, honestly.
Yes. Yeah. And we are here now. And a bunch of people are here looking at us, talking like they're not here, but they're here, and they came for you. So initially I was going to ask, how will this be a problem started, and what were the challenges, the issues, but you've talked quite extensively about that already. So I think I'll just dig right into which is your favorite edition and which are your favorite stories. Give us hard facts. Who are the people who have been doing the real work, and what do you like?
My favorite child.
Yes.
We finally got to pay people. That was to the point that I actually left with this problem. If we are not paying people, then what's the point of doing this? But yeah, so we've paid people. Everybody was paid, except the beta readers. You don't get paid for that. But yeah, the editors were paid. The artist was paid. The writers, every single one was paid. Even before we had printed it, I was like, we have to make sure everyone has been paid. So that's why I'm proudest of it.
Individual stories?
Individual stories.
It doesn't have to be from this edition, even though this is your favorite edition.
Oh, okay, that's easy. And I'm going to say it's Peter Nana's story, The Tunnel. That was the first story that I felt like I'd worked. The first story I felt like I really worked on to it was already a good story, but to just adding a little bit of something special. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I have read, obviously I read the anthology myself. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I am also a writer, not in this particular anthology, but in the very first one that came out, I had a story in there. And as many grown men have said here, Olivia takes their writing virginity, she publishes. She did that for me as well, and it's very encouraging and it makes you want to write more, so we're grateful for that. But in this particular anthology, I would say my favorite one was probably Baby Potion. I'm not going to give it away all it's about, but it deals with issues of societal pressure and tainted love and possibly bestiality. So there's some very interesting reads there in that book. So that was my personal favorite. Let's move on to Kenya writing industry. Where are we? Where do you see, from your experience of 10 years of doing this job, how is the Kenyan writing or literary industry looking? Are we structured? Do we have writers who are doing big things, or is it just you and Kevin in a room every year removing a book? Where are we?
I think the writing industry, I think I don't have good words for it, honestly, as it is right now. I think it's very individualistic in the sense that, like, I can list names of writers who have made it, but like, not seem like we are all moving in the same direction. Like it's, I don't know. Let's see, how do I phrase this gently? It doesn't have to be gentle. I mean, the writing is not good, my friends. There are a lot of, I think there are too many writers and not enough editors. Where are the editors? And the editors, I think, again, like I was saying, you have to, like, if you're going to be an editor, you have to put the editing first. Because when you start being, like, if you're a writer and you're, God, I'm trying to be polite, but a lot of people are writing. Yes, there's a lot of writing going on. It's not very good because people are writing to be seen. Like, if I'm writing, I'm not writing to be, to just have, like, what happened to the days of blogging are not as prominent as they were back then. Like, when I started, if I was saying, like, if I have 10 years of, for years before even I found like Do Not Feed the Bloggers, before I even got my first job, before I even said, like, blogging for other people, I had my own space in which I would just write my own things. And that's what got me noticed. But like now, it's like there's nowhere to find. People don't blog as much. They don't have their own resources. They don't have their own website. So like, if they want to be published, it's like, oh, here, I want to be published. I have no prior work ever. I've never written anything. At least, like, I could say, like, I don't want to say that, like, Alex is like that, because he was doing other things. He was writing other journals, and he had a previous, it's not the same thing. But, like, people are writing. They want to be writers, but they're just not thinking about their work. They're not keeping it. They're not building the discipline to, to be noticed. Yes.
Would you say that you mentioned that you had done a few workshops, even you, when you saw that your product was not at the caliber that you wanted, you signed up, you did a few workshops. Are those prominent? Are they useful? Or what are the systems that if someone wants to become a writer, how do you go about now improving yourself and going from, being a reader to being a writer?
You have to write. Like, there's no, you have to write if you want to be a writer. If you want to be a writer, you to move from reader to writer, you have to write. But, sorry?
Thank you. There's a question he asked about publishing in Kenya. I would like to contribute to that. You see, when after high school, me and my friend called Paul, we wanted to write stories. We wanted to write books, novels, and short stories. So we started writing. He was writing a comedy. He was a comedy guy, so he wanted to write a comedy or something to laugh at. And myself, I knew always I wanted to write horror. I wanted to write something spooky, scary, and all that. So we wrote to the East African publishing publishers, and then we also wrote to there are these guys called Longhorn guys. And then Longhorn guys, they responded. They gave us the procedure. They told us what to do when you want to get published in Kenya, but the East African guys didn't. So later on, we started writing and sending out stories, but not getting any responses. So I sent a book to East African publishers, and then I met with the editor. He told me he was the chief editor there when I went. The lady who showed me where he was, I went to talk to him. So he asked me what my story was about, and that story was written in 2010. So I based it on the economic crash of 2008, but with the horror aspect of it, with my character called Kimani there. So I told him what it was about, and then at the end he told me, you know what? That story, nobody will read it in here. Nobody will read it in Kenya. So why don't you seem to have a talent, why don't you go and do a story on children? Go write something about children's stories. And then we can publish that for you and you'll make money. No, he told me knew a lot of writers who are making money as writing children's stories. So I went and sat down, I started thinking of how can I write a children's story? You know, he was telling me what to do, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to write horror stories, and I couldn't write children's story that was horror. No, nobody would read it. So later on, I wrote another book. I took it to Longhorn, guys. I found a young man there. I really appreciated it. And then he told me he would give it to some guys to review it, and then I would get a response. But I kept going back. They told me they would write to me. So I left my email, my phone, and everything. But they didn't. So I followed up, and I followed up in vain. At the end, I just gave up that one. So I have those manuscripts are still with me. Oh, and then another one I wrote and sent to Story Moja. Now that was a that was horror. One of my finest horror books I've written with a lot of violence. You know, the horror we like that kind of thing. Some blood there, some skinning people. You know. so I took it there, and when they reviewed it, they didn't seem to understand it. They were reviewing horror because they were looking at it from an aspect of just a ordinary story that. The violence was giving them a lot of horror story. Or when the disturbance was giving them a lot of disturbance. But they didn't think it was horror. They thought it was just, the horror was an anomaly in the story. so I read that and I got very discouraged. And there was a lady there, she passed on, God bless her soul. She was called Juliet. So Juliet told me, why don't you start a blog and post some of those stories there, because Kenyans don't know about horror stories and they don't know about speculative fiction. So later on when Kevin reached out to me, he said they want to publish some stories and they wanted speculative fiction. He told me, he explained to me why it is called, will this be a problem? Like, is it going to be a problem if you do something different? So to read this, you need to pull away from that concept of an African story. The one, you know, like the ones in high school when you read the ones they pile up for exams. So you pull out of that and extend your imagination, which is what in the publishing in Kenya, that's what I experienced. That lack of beyond. You see the beyond, like what's beyond an ordinary African life? Why should we always confine ourselves to a story of poverty or some guy going through crazy stuff? You know? If I write a story about poverty, I'll make it a horror story. So because that is what I do. So I can't write it like you're going to have a happy ending. You know, that it has to be a horror story where there's no happy ending in that poverty. So you pull yourself up. If you're fighting a monster, you're gonna die. so that's what we do. So you go beyond that. Nothing about you prayed until something happened. That is not going to be. It doesn't fit with the Lucia problem. So because that is what they tell you every day. So. You just pray until your voice cracks. You say all the words and nothing happens. And then the horror story happens. So if you're chased by crazy things, they keep chasing. So what we are thinking is the expansion of the imagination of the Kenyan. You see, like we see beyond the ordinary. When people read Stephen King, I read Stephen King, or Dean Koontz, or Sidney Sheldon's, and the other guys. Yeah? The James Patterson and all that, you seem to fit in the story. That's what I realized with my friends when I was young, that they fit in the story. But if it's an African, you know, they realize an African, a name like Kimani, I like that name Kimani, I've used a lot of times. They start feeling, you know, like that's not African story. I gave a friend of mine a story to read in campus. That's what we call the pencil. You may have read it. He told me, hey, you know, you write, this is not the way Africans. It was an African story. So what we are trying to do, what we want actually is to expand the imagination, reach beyond the ordinary African stories. So you can always tell about a war in the universe somewhere on Pluto or something, a war going on there, and people read it and they appreciate it. You tell about the first story I wrote. Was about dead guys. So like they come back to life. No, not really life. They are still dead, but they they want to climb on your back. So when you're walking, like you're walking to work, go to work, like or from work, because they used to do that in the evening. Somebody climbs on your back. At first you think it's a joke, and then it turns out to be a guy who died some time back, and he's on your back. And then you go through the emotions of that, realizing this guy is dead and he's on my back and he's not letting go. So So you die. You die actually because of, it's on your back. And then once you die, they bury you, and then you also come back, and then you climb on somebody's back. So it goes on like that, like that. That's my first story. So we want things like that is what we are. That's the essence of I think the anthology. The way Kevin explained it to me, things that are the speculative fiction. We are speculating things. Thank you. Bye. Yes.
Sorry. So do you choose stories, or do you just follow where the story goes when you're writing? Like how's your process? Do you follow, like, if someone's climbing on your back and they're dead, do you think it through, or it just comes?
Well, I get an idea. First of all, it's normally like, the way when you close your eyes and a story they read for you, it was inspired by two events. One day I'm at race course there in Gong Road. I'm seeing a donkey on the other side, and it seems to be talking to the other donkey. So it has a lot of it has a lot of teeth out. And I'm thinking, why is it not eating meat? It's supposed to be eating meat. Or why it has so much teeth? And cows usually have gaps, and very few of that. And then of course the disappearances which I've told you about. So you can read the story to find out more. But usually I get the idea. Normally I get the end of the end idea. I see a guy, and then I'm thinking he's dead. And then, so I have to work backward, like what killed him? So he has to die in the story, but he's dead already. When I start a story, if it's about a guy who's going to die, he's dead. But now I'm just trying to find out how he dies, the most interesting ways. That's what I do. It's always backward with me. With me, I work a story from the end going to, so mostly I kill my characters, because that's what life does. You are a... You're a main character in your own story, but like I thought one day, there's a story I posted on my blog one day. So let's say there's a hole there, a very deep hole, that if you go in it, you go for good. But we all in here, we are trying to survive, and we are being, very great. And then now, but we are going towards that hole because we can't help it. So you just go and go and go, and that's how all the stories go anyway. So that's what happens. So what I was trying to explain is, we want more. Like when you read the stories in that book, you realize we are not just sticking to the normal African story. The ones that BBC guys like, about how their house flies around. If their house flies around, maybe they should be mutated, so they eat people. Yeah, they the way I was reading one time how they eat. They spit on you, and then they digest you, then they drink you up. I think that would be great story about houseflies.
Thank you so much, Peter. Those who need counseling, please see us after the session. We'll get you some treatment. But yes, I think the point that we've gotten from that is that there are not that very many options for people who want to become writers in Kenya. And because of that, we've had to forge our own paths to give voice to our stories. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. But as you're saying that, it made me think and wonder. That's Kenya. We hear of these struggles in Kenya. When I Googled top fantasy writers in Africa, a list came, and on that list, I would say 90% of them were from West Africa. So in terms of African fiction, African writing, the names that we know are China Achebe. For us who like fantasy, there's Ndedi Okoffo. There's just a lot of West Africans in there. So my question to you, Olivia, what are they doing that we are not doing? How come their stories are able to be heard and received by the international community, whereas here in East Africa we are struggling to get dead people off our backs?
I think maybe, I don't know. I have a theory. I'm not sure if it's accurate, but I think West Africans, wanajiamini, like they're not afraid of. They're not going to tell their story regardless of who is listening. Whereas Kenyans are like, oh, I don't know. I feel like we we wait for someone, we wait for things. So like it's always for like we wait for someone to like if like the way like let's say for example with this problem, we wait for some people will not submit just because it's been a call out. They'll submit because we heard about it in Tor, or it's never organic. Like I have to tell this story. That's my theory. That's my theory. But West Africans they're very very tied to their culture, extremely tied to their culture. From like they made their born. So in from their food, everything is theirs. Like their food is West African food. You cannot put West African food and East African food like on this table and that table. I am pretty sure a lot of people will pick this because our food is we are so I don't know. We are very colonized in the East. I'd say we are so very very colonized, and so the colonization has made us think that like we are lesser. There's like that thing is actually very accurate. We feel a little bit lesser about our stories and about our things. Where like even like for the best example I can give is like music, like the music industry, where like people are always shouting like, oh, Kenyans they just like Afrobeat, piano, they don't like their own things. But then like we do have our own things, but like it's just we never just push it till the end, like like because of I've said this before. I blame Abbas Kuba for like that Nini, like for the way he
was just sitting casually.
That's what I'm saying. Is it Abbas or the one for Kapuka? That after that diss track, man, like there was like Kapuka was doing something, like we were doing something, but now after you were told Kwenda, like after being insulted, we're like, oh no, we're going to do other things. We're going to do urban tone. We're going to do gengeton. No, we don't want to do gengeton anymore. We want to do something else because like the consistency is we don't really have it as East Africans. As Southern Africans, I don't know. Wazungu wamepopulate sana. They really kanyakia the blacks. So I don't know if I cannot make a clear assessment of Southern Africa and their writing, but for Eastern Africa we're extremely colonized. That is for me the issue that I keep coming across.
So why don't we lean, because I feel like as much as West Africa, they're in touch with their history, they tell their stories true to themselves. Our story is that we were colonized. That is our story. And there's probably even story before that, but we need to lean into that. We tell our stories of colonization, we tell of how we broke it, or how it held on to us, if that is the case. And then at least once we get past that, then we can look at, who are we? Because it seems like it's an identity problem as East Africans that we've not yet found we're very well spoken, we're very hardworking, we will get things done, we'll have nice structures, but there's no soul, there's no that West African sauce in the East African sauce. So, yeah.
I think we just need to like keep writing. I think because like even like when I read submissions from Kenyans, like there is some sort of there's some sort of lyricism that's there. Like there are hints of a vibe. I don't know. There are hints of a vibe of a sound. Like we are almost. I can tell that there's something there that's very similar. There's a lot of surrealism. A lot of Kenyans like to write surrealist fiction. Magical realism is also another thing that Kenyans like, from what I see from the submissions I get. So the only way to like keep seeing it is if we keep writing. And now because of this problem, now we're paying people, so hopefully more people, now we're getting reviews in Tor. Now people know who we are. So hopefully that will inspire more Kenyans to write. Yeah.
So I think to wrap this up so that people can go back.
There are questions.
Oh, sorry. Hey, hands are everywhere. Let's just pass the mic down and you guys can figure out the order.
Yeah. So I mentioned how I ended up with my story in the publication, right? And I don't have much experience with non-fiction publication, but as fate would have it, me and my brother over there have been editors now for the academic student side for like 3-4 years now. for law review. And the very first one was started in Strathmore. It existed alone for a while. And then when the guy who started it there moved to the university I was at, he was like, no, we're not just going to be a solo thing. And then he went out of his way to help set up law reviews at every single law school that exists in the country. And now, like my generation of law students has been emboldened to, for those of you all on Twitter, we're just arguing with the seniors. It's like, no, yeah, I've been right. I was like, okay, no, but my distilled thought is over there, the link, you know? And it's surreal to see what the critical mass has done. Because that scene didn't exist when I started uni, and when I was finishing, it had been developed in just that short period when we have our own voice as a generation of like younger legal researchers, and the scene is important. It's insane. And now like we're presenting in conferences everywhere. There's a friend of mine who's in South Africa right now, and I was just like, we don't even have to build anything new. Like, will this be a problem has existed for 10 years? Without stalking random Kenyan writers on Twitter, I wouldn't have known it exists. And I don't feel like it should be like that. And the simple part of it is, like, just create the scene. Like, thread together everyone who exists. You've been in the game for a decade plus. You have to know oodles and oodles of people who are writing, publishing.
Oh, may I have the tea?
Yeah. So, like, I guess all of this rumble is just one very heartfelt entreaty. Just bring everyone who's already doing it together in a room like this, like once in every 3 months. Let people meet up. Let things intermingle. Someone wants to start will this be a problem, knock off, let them, help them, you know, and see what happens in 4 years. Yeah.
Evening. So I want to make a comment on the question about Kenyans and what's holding us back. Has anyone ever seen the image of crabs in a bucket? Yes. Need I say more? Congratulations on your 5th edition. My question is my question is about, first, congratulations on paying the writers. Yeah, it's not a common thing. So I congratulate you on that. But I wanted to know if you're considering submitting some of the entries to international prizes, like the NOMO and the other awards. Yes. Because one of the things we've realized in this country is, because we tend not to look within the country, we want to look about what's happening outside. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's part of the problem of why we're not. We want the lens is outside, then we can. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a question I wanted to know about. Why are you planning on doing things like that? Yes. And just as a comment on the crabs in the bucket, just for the record, I love that concept, but crabs in a bucket there is no such concept. Like, in what world is it that crabs exist in a bucket? Crabs exist in their natural environment. So if you see crabs in a bucket, somebody put them there, and then they have to fight. That's my 2 cents on that. Yeah.
Okay, let me answer his question before you go. So we are planning on doing. Actually, it's because of Somto. If it was up to me, I wouldn't have bothered with those things, because I don't personally do not care for white validation. But because now Somto, is more experienced in this. He has normals and these awards. So the reason that we published the anthology in January is so that we could get there's something called a writer eligibility period, where books that were published in 2025 past a certain date are all they qualify for awards. So you have to keep pushing them and getting reviews. So we've sent reviews to Locus, Lightspeed, Strange Horizons, multiple of these big SFF publications, and that's how you get readers, so that people can now nominate. Because it's yes, you can push people, but the readers nominate stories. So putting them out at this specific time of year and pushing them towards certain avenues is what we're trying to do, and so that people can get nominated. And as well as it being published by Shilita Publishing Group, which is my publishing company. I haven't spoken about it much, but yeah, so there's Shilita, you know, it's going to be a publishing company. It's like a three-pronged fork. We'll have, Will This Be a Problem is already, it's there. We'll have Asterisk, which is for the podcast network. We'll have like, you know, segments where like you pitch something and we will help you produce it and you know, make it come to fruition. But it's not a podcast, like you're not going to make 1,000 episodes. We're going to give you the opportunity to make like a 3-part episode about something. Like if you have like, you know, like for example, a true crime podcast, you have true crime, like it becomes over sensationalized at some point in time where it becomes, it's very weird the way it's done. But like if you have an idea for like this crime that happened and all these things, like I can only do the research on one thing. So it's just giving guys a chance to specialize and like look up something. Anyway, more details later. But yeah, so we are hoping to push people into the sphere of, you know, so that you can win stuff and get awards and things like that. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
So, first question. You mentioned that there's not many writers you see in the Kenyan ecosystem who are making it. I'd love to know what making it looks like.
No, sorry, I just repeat your question. I didn't hear the first part.
You mentioned that there's very few writers in this Kenyan space, so ecosystem, who you would say are making it. So I'd love to hear what your description of making it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then to contribute a bit to the question of, or to the conversation of West African writers being very big, I wonder how much of it is markets. Like when we talk about music, by the time a Nigerian is big in Nigeria, they maybe have 50 million followers, and that's a quarter of just their local population in that country. The equivalent in Kenya is maybe 4 or 5 million. So I wonder how much market plays a part. And then in thinking about market, I attended a writers forum for Kiswahili writers. There's this platform called the Kiswahili Prize. So they brought the writers of the awards in that year together. And it was interesting to see writers who write in Tanzania versus in Kenya. So the ones in Tanzania say they're writing in Kiswahili is because that's what the market will read. And actually there's a lot of great fiction and mystery in Kiswahili, which I didn't know existed before coming across Kiswahili Prize. And then the writers from Kenya would say how for them writing in Kiswahili is a form of activism because you're already restricting yourself to like a slice of the market, right? So unless you have pathways to take your writing to Tanzania, it's a whole thing. But then again, in thinking about market and language, do you think there is a possible future where local language writing is a thing and there's a market for it? Yeah, thanks.
Okay. The first question, sorry, what I meant to say, I think maybe I didn't phrase my statement correctly, was that like, when I say they are making it, I'm like, there are some names I can list where I'm like Dennis Muga has released a book. Who else? Okay, Dennis is the only person I can think of right now. But like, Yvonne is an academic. Also, that was another issue with Kenyan writing. There are so many academics. What are you talking about? Anyway, what happened to hello? How are you? Yeah, so with what does it look like to have succeeded? To have a book, okay, to me, I don't know, my definition of success is very different. But like to me, when I say that, I'm like, they're like, you can list names of people who have achieved, have written books and have gotten, their bio is now getting longer and longer, which is what most people would think success is. But that's not my personal view of success. of a successful writer. I think like a successful writer, in my opinion, is someone who, you know, can can cause a bit of collectivism, like a bunch of people come together, and because of, you know, of like your writing, because of your contributions, things like that. Like collectivism is to me the idea of success, and I find that the current Kenyan ecosystem is extremely individualistic. Does that answer your question, or not really? Okay, what's the next one? The market and language. Market in West Africa. I like I said, I don't know. I haven't gone for the workshops and the fairs there in West Africa, but like they do have markets. Maybe just because there are more. I mean, they are more than us, for sure. But I don't think that can't be the only factor. I think there are more. But I right now I cannot think of a clever way to answer your question.
I also found just looking at those lists of West African writers, there was a common theme of, firstly, a lot of them were women, and then they were women who were educated abroad in either the UK or the US, but have very close ties with Africa. So they go, they get very high levels of education out there, they do their masters in what and what, and then they come back and they take all the source of Africa and then they manage to frame it in ways that appeal to Western audiences but sound very African. So that when we here read about it, we're like, oh, we can relate to that. And when the white people read it out there, they're like, oh, wow, this is written just like J.K. Rowling. So, you know, they manage to blend, I think, in their stories enough of both elements of the Western and the African that it's more appealing. And I feel like us here in East Africa should be able to do that with our colonial history. We don't need to go out there to get that Western perspective. We've been forced down our throats with it. I think maybe what we lack is the African aesthetic. We're finding ourselves, as we've said. So the market is an issue. We are smaller, but I think if we look at East Africa as a block, we don't just think of ourselves as Kenya. If we're writing stories that, you know, traverse Uganda and Tanzania, then we're much larger as a group. So that's
I think that ties into her next question, because like we cannot think of East Africa as a block, because Tanzania, then they write in Kiswahili. I'd be hard pressed to find.
But we can write in both. We can have English and Swahili in the same story. It doesn't have to be either or.
But it's, you know. Sorry? Yes, I really would like to get into translation. That's something that like would in the future for probably the next 10 years I would like us to, you know, publish SFF in Kikuyu and Luo and Luya and, like, you know, Kiswahili as well. Like, but that also means that, like, you know, just because someone can, it's not the same as like if I write this story and then I give a Luya to translate it. There are so many things that get lost in translation. And, like, you know, some people are just work at telling stories. So even if you can have a perfect Kikuyu to English dictionary in your head, but then your stories are boring, like, especially like a language like Kikuyu, very, very different ways of speaking. Like, you hear a joke and you're like, please explain it to me. And then they're like, no. Not because I don't want to, but like, it's not a joke anymore. It becomes something else. So that is something that, like, that is not something I'd love to tackle, but I have no idea how to, because, like, you know, we'd have to go and get storytellers from the village to do these things, yeah. Instead of us going to the village and then copying stories and writing them, we have to now go and get these people and, you know, elevate them. Elevate, that makes it sound funny. But, like, no, like, you know, just bring them into the fold, yeah.
If I may add points, there is a kind of problem we as East Africans especially have. We suffer from homogeny. And I think that's the reason why even the old heads find Sheng so repulsive. Like, just the idea of mixing anything with anything else is so foreign and it makes us cringe and our skin crawl. So unless we overcome that and we are able to allow a little bit of, intercultural interaction where somebody can even feel comfortable speaking in as many languages as possible without feeling alienated, then I think that would be the seed that grows into a tree that could, at least give us a path towards a future. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Crabs in a bucket mentality, as you said. It's really good. Thank you everyone for giving contribution to the discussion. I think we've been here for quite a while, so I will pose the last question to Olivia, which is what next? Where is Shibitsa, and will this be a problem? Give us your thoughts, your roadmap on what is the future for this company, what can we expect, and people who want to be involved and would like to be a part of this journey, what can they do?
Will this be a problem? Let's start with this problem. This problem, submissions open on February 15th. So we are, we're going to do this again. I do not make, my plan for Shilitsa and for Will This Be a Problem is that we're not going to make any call outs unless we already have the money to pay people. So but when I'm telling you this, I have enough money to pay 10 writers. Thereabouts. Yeah. So please submit your stories. Just keep submitting. The only way that I can keep doing this is if people submit stories, if you buy the book. And anyway, yeah, buy the book, support. As for Shilitsa in itself, still I want to to really focus on SFF, speculative fiction and fantasy. So yeah, that's really, it's not going to be the only thing, but for the extended for the future right now, is we're going to be focusing on speculative fiction. So short story collections, maybe from one author, maybe another idea I have I really want to execute is having a collection of shorts, an autobiography, a biography of someone, like a fictional person, but it's a collection of short stories, and let's say there are 10 stories, each is written by a different person, but it's same character, so we can see what we get. Just experimentation with writing. That's really what I want to do, and especially group writing. I would like more collective actions like that. Yeah, and for the podcast, for the podcast network, yeah, more like mini documentaries, basically. Just a short production that someone can be proud of. It's not going to come out the day after you propose it, but yeah, more content that is, I hate the word content, more stuff that is that is thought out over a long period of time, collaborative. That's really the soul of Shilitsa, collaboration. Yeah. And then Mko Strict, oh yeah, I forgot. Mko Strict is the essay publication. We're gonna bring it back. Will This Be a Problem initially started as essays and arts and culture and stuff like that. And yeah, so we decided we're gonna have Mko Strict, very strict, shouting. We're not mincing words here. Very strict, very harsh. Well, harsh in a smart way. Yes. Criticism, analysis, reviews, things like that. More reviews on Will This Be a Problem stuff. And when I say we want to reviews, I'm not going. I don't really want you to review that has been forgotten, overshadowed by other names like anthologies, that even a publication like an online publication that was shattered, something like that. Just more reviews, yeah, more thinking about stuff, more thought, more collaboration.
Just more.
More. Yeah.
We want more.
More from Kenyans. Yeah.
All right. So I think that brings a conclusion to the launch of the Will This Be a Problem 5th Anthology. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for coming and supporting us. We really do appreciate it. I have seen a few of you with this paper. It is a list of cocktails named after the various stories or characters in the book. Please have a look at it. They're quite funny, and I think they will taste quite tasty as well. And yeah, share on socials, read the books, support the arts. Thank you so much for coming. We love and appreciate you all. Let's go.